So in this speech, Putin also used ominous language, nuclear language, pledging to use all means necessary to defend Russia.
Это не блеф.
This is not a bluff. The citizens of Russia can be sure that the territorial integrity of our homeland, our independence, and freedom will be ensured. And those who try to blackmail us with nuclear weapons should know that the prevailing winds can turn in their direction.
Inside the UN General Assembly in New York, we're just over an hour from now. President Biden will speak directly to world leaders for the second time as commander-in-chief. It is a critical time. Biden's speech comes just hours after Russian President Vladimir Putin signaled a major public escalation of the war in Ukraine, announcing the mobilization of some 300,000 Russian reservists and threatening a nuclear attack in clear and disturbing terms.
As to the question of Putin's nuclear threat, look, that's something the Pentagon, the intelligence community watches every day to get the best information they can about where Russian nuclear weapons are. We've been told so far there's no indication Putin is moving any of that around, but you can be sure that is continued to be under watch 24/7. Jim?
These are significant developments. The Russian president threatening not just an expansion of the war, 300,000 troops, but also making a nuclear threat. And I wonder, do we expect the president to respond?
Next for us, Russian President Vladimir Putin suddenly escalating at least his rhetoric about a nuclear threat to world leaders as President Biden prepares to speak next hour at the United Nations. It certainly is. And this morning, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that he is calling up 300,000 reservists, marking the first major mobilization since World War II. Putin also warning the West he is not bluffing on potentially using nuclear weapons. Those comments expected to be a focus for President Biden, both during today's speech in just minutes and in his private talks, of course, at the UN with world leaders.
Russia will then likely make some kind of statement that these areas are part of Russia. Does that change Ukraine's calculus or that of its Western supporters or that of Russia? We don't know. But this threat of nuclear force in the background is making many very nervous. Jim?
Does Russia claim attacks on those territories are, in effect, attacks on Russian territory? I know you'll be watching closely. Nick Payton-Walsh, keep yourself and your team safe. We have heard Putin rattle the nuclear saber before, perhaps not with the clarity that he did so overnight. And I wonder, based on the officials you speak with, are they taking this latest threat, should they, more seriously?
Well, I think they have to take it more seriously.
Soon, President Biden will deliver a critical speech here at the UN General Assembly before world leaders. It comes right as the Russian President Vladimir Putin takes threatening new action in his war against Ukraine, including an immediate partial mobilization, he calls it, of 300,000 new Russian troops. He also alarmingly insisted that the possibility of using nuclear weapons is now on the table and not a bluff. We have heard, of course, the Russian president rattle the nuclear saber before, as have you. But this time he said in so many words, this is not a bluff. And I wonder, do you take this as simply rhetoric at this point, or do you believe the threat is real? We are live at the UN General Assembly in New York, where moments from now, President Biden will address world leaders in the wake of deep threats from the Russian president, including the possibility of using nuclear weapons over the war in Ukraine. Indeed, as the Russian president made that threat, he used the words explicitly, this is not a bluff. You're seeing live pictures there of what we believe to be the arrival of President Biden's motorcade, always easy to recognize here at the UN General Assembly because it is the longest. In fact, as you see this limo passed here with those two flags, and there are always two of them for security, inside one of them is President Biden, the Beast, as his limousine is known there.
This is Russia's first such mobilization since World War II, and Putin also raised in his remarks the possibility once again of using nuclear weapons. Russian leader, as Caitlin was just laying out, did make also a new veiled nuclear threat toward the West.
Keep in mind this, Putin lifted the veil on the nuclear threat with these comments. He said in so many words, this is not a bluff. And if there is one lesson, Kate, from Vladimir Putin and his words and threats in the last 2 decades, that is listen to what he says, because oftentimes he follows through.
Yeah, and Caitlin, what are you hearing? Tell me more about what you're hearing. I think we see President Biden walking into the UN General Assembly right now. Let's see if he's heading up to speak.
And with many of you, we work to try to avert it. Tackling climate crisis, as the previous speaker, $369 billion toward climate change. I have pledged to contribute up to $6 billion to that effort. Today, I'm announcing another $2.9 billion. But today, we're seeing disturbing trends. Russia shunned the non-proliferation ideals embraced by every other nation at the 10th NPT Review Conference. And again today, as I said, they're making irresponsible nuclear threats to use nuclear weapons. China is conducting an unprecedented, concerning nuclear buildup without any transparency. Thank you for your tolerance, for listening to me. I appreciate it very much. God bless you all.